Hello, and welcome to Lore Watch, a roundtable freeform discussion about lore in your favorite media. I'm your host, Joe Perez, one of several lore-focused folks from Blizzard Watch, and I've got my marvelous co-host with me today, Matt Rossi. How you doing today, Matt?
It went from 13 degrees Celsius to -4 degrees Celsius in the span of a day. I am very not enjoying this new thing the weather does, where it goes from kind of autumn to straight into the Arctic hellscape.
For those of you in the non-Celsius or non-metric parts of the world, that's the equivalent of going from about 55 degrees down to, I want to say, 24, 23, somewhere in that range. It's a pretty big
Close
swing.
to that, yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, friends, we're not here to talk about the weather despite our name being Blizzard Watch. Instead, we're going to be talking about questions that you, our wonderful listeners, have sent in to us. If you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, be sure to send those in. You can send them into podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. If you want to hit us up on Discord, we have two channels set aside. We have the Q and Podcast Questions channel, which is open for everybody. Same rules apply. And if you are a Patreon subscriber, you get access to the Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel, where we tend to look there first for questions and themes as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. This first one is, well, I think I missed. Oh, there it is. It's from Parasolath. Sometimes y'all put names in weird places. I appreciate it. Matt's Q answer about using lore walkers as storytellers, a celebrity house tour of a timeline, got me thinking about what stories could shine in this format. For example, the War of the Three Hammers, starting with Modimus Anvilmar's death, seeing the Bronzebeards drive out the Wildhammers and Dark Irons, the Dark Irons' retaliation, and culminating in Prince Dagran Tharisian II's coronation as High King of the Dwarves. Could Matt and Joe explore other epic historical moments that would make great lore-walking stories and do a deep dive into what the War of the Three Hammers lore-walking story would look like? Well, we'll see how far we can get with that one, folks. But yeah, you hit one on the like one on the head that I've been really wanting to see since we started going back in time. We've done the Time Ways, we've done, stuff with the Bronze Dragonflight so much, and now we have lore walking. I've always wanted to see the stuff surrounding the dwarves, the War of the Three Hammers. I always wanted to see like what that was beforehand, like how tensions rose. I would love to see how, what the fighting breaking out, like what it looked like. And yeah, because I think we haven't really had a dwarf expansion, despite the War Within starting with Earth, and I don't know that it really counts, so to speak.
I mean, we didn't get to know anything about the dwarves through it, so no, not really.
Yeah, so I would personally really, really like that. I think that would be really epic. What about you, Matt? Was there like what's a big call out for you?
Well, first off, I mean, before I even talk about it, I wrote back when I was still doing Know Your Lore, I wrote a huge post about the War of the Three Hammers.
Yes, you did.
And another pretty big one about the Anvilmar dynasty, because the Anvilmars really got the shaft. They had the one king who was just the best king ever, and his son immediately got the throne stolen from him by the Bronzebeards. And this needs to be pointed out. When this all started, the Dark Irons and the Wildhammers left for the same reasons. They were both like sick of the Bronzebeards. Like the Bronzebeards aren't the unalloyed heroes of this whole deal. The only reason that the Bronzebeards and the Wildhammers ended up on the same side of things is that the Dark Irons just went nuclear and with magic that nobody had ever seen before. And they attacked the Wildhammers too for no reason. The Wildhammers weren't doing anything to them. The Bronzebeards had indeed kicked them out of, Ironforge. That's fine. The war between the Bronzebeards and the Dark Iron, that made perfect sense. But the Dark Iron deciding, while we're at it, we're going to destroy the Wildhammers. The Wildhammers had done nothing to them. It's amazing how self-inflicted the ultimate defeat of the Dark Irons was.
Mm-hmm.
How they just if they had just kept their anger contained to the group that had actually, done something to them, who knows? It's quite possible the Wildhammers would have been like, look, we're perfectly happy up in our mountain fastnesses. We're not coming down to deal with this. You all can handle your own problems. I've always thought that that's wild. It's utterly wild how that all went down. I think it would be great to see it. I would love to watch how, just the fact that the Bronzebeards even decided to toss the Anvilmars, like basically the Anvilmar line ended with the son who got his permanent Senate seat, and that was it. They're like, yeah, here's your honorary seat. Now go away, and they're still alive. The Anvilmars still have people in Ironforge. I think Thargas is still alive. The younger son, the elder son of the line died. But the younger son, we saw him in the comic book, and from what I understand, he's still around. He didn't go anywhere. I think I still have his action figure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's wild to think about like all the possibilities for that. Like you could do I could actually imagine this as a TV show, like multiple seasons of Dwarf War. And there's like the Anvilmar opening, which is like almost like the prequel. And then when you find out what happens to the Anvilmars, it moves you into the big story of the three warring houses. It's sort of like Game of Thrones with dwarves. So yeah, I'd love to see more of it. I would absolutely love to see like all the different ways that everybody was kind of a jerk. How everybody, ultimately came to whatever you want to call the final resolution of their issues. And, one of the things that always gets me is imagine that during this conflict, Ragnaros gets summoned to Azeroth. That's almost an afterthought. Like that's right near the end of the war. And you just wow. Like that's the showstopper ending. Is that Ragnaros gets pulled through to Azeroth and he takes out an entire like region. Like the entirety of both the Burning Steppes and the Searing Gorge are because Ragnaros got summoned. And that's how that war ended. The allied armies of the dwarves were coming to, clean house on the Dark Irons for invading their cities. And as they're getting there, gigantic fireball explosion takes out multiple mountain ranges, and they're like, okay, this feels like we don't need to go in there now, because who knows what just happened. We're gonna go home. Just so yeah, I absolutely would love to see more of that. If we're looking for something that isn't that though, I've got a few possible candidates. The fact that we've never actually gotten to see the complete War of the Ancients, or even something that sums up all the stuff that happened during it.
Yeah, we've only had bits and pieces, right? Like even with like the High Mountain stuff, and
even in Legion, we just got a couple flashbacks
of very specific points of view. Yeah.
Yeah. So I gotta feel like there's gotta be at some point the War of the Ancients needs to get more than a couple of flashbacks. It is the pivotal moment in Azerothian history. It is the thing that made everything the way it is now. It's what changes the world from what it was to what it currently is. So yeah, that needs to be there. I've said up and down that I'd love to do some. I'd love to see the troll, the high elves, the Arathi, and the trolls, like that whole setup for that war. The whole idea that the high elves were like, we'll get the humans to help us, only for the humans to go, okay, give us 100 mages. Teach 100 of us magic, and we'll do it. And how that basically, that 1,000-year period of time, everything the Eastern Kingdoms goes through is directly based on that. Like that alliance of high elves and humans created the Seven Kingdoms. Like the Seven Kingdoms didn't exist before that happened. The nations that then basically controlled the next 1,000 years, that moment, and the fate of Silvermoon really from that moment. The fact that Silvermoon got to be there and the Amani trolls were basically penned in into Zolomon, and eventually we got desperate enough to start embodying their own gods, forcibly bringing the Loa into themselves. A technique that, when it got learned by other trolls, led to them eating their own gods. So yeah, a ton of stuff happens from the war, the troll wars, that I'd love to see. There's so many more, but I've mentioned two, and I don't want to like cut you off. I think you should get to mention some as well.
Well, one of the other ones that I was thinking about for a long time that I would love to see get some in-game attention is actually the Fall of Nomergon. Um, we've never really witnessed the essentially the war that drove the gnomes out, the everything that happened there. We know what happened, but we've never seen it. And I think
Yeah, and then again, when we say we know what happened, we know the cliff notes.
yeah, we have a very, very, very cliff notey version of it. So yeah, it's one of those things that like I keep thinking of. Like I understand that gnomes had Mechagon and all that stuff happened, but learning what happened originally in Nomergon would be really, really interesting to me. Also,
Yeah,
seeing sort of like the evolution from the OG Mechanome into them settling and into them becoming creatures of flesh would also be really interesting to me because we have an idea for a lot of the other races on how that worked out. Um,
mhm.
Gnomes, we kind of don't know why they settled where they settled. We don't know why they wound up there. Humans, we have an idea. Dwarves, we have an idea. Like it's we have all these like little tiny inklings of all these
Yeah,
other places,
yeah.
but gnomes have never really been explored in that capacity.
I have a headcanon for it, but it's pure headcanon.
Go for it. What is your headcanon for it?
Well, we know that the discs of Narganon were taken, the real ones were taken south, uh, to what ended up becoming Ulduar. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Uldaman, sorry.
Aldemon, yep.
And and we know that Uldaman is supposedly, it's full of trogs. And we know that trogs, among other things, they can be the form of both dwarves and gnomes. Both of them can devolve into those things. We see the same trogs invading Mechagon itself, not Mechagon, Nomergon. And I think all these gnomes were essentially the support staff to maintain the discs. Like when, oh bloody heck, I can't remember his name. Tyr. When Tyr grabbed the discs and got his buddies Ironaya and Arcadis to come with him, I think they brought attendants, and amongst those attendants were servants of Mimiron, whose whole purpose was to keep the discs from Ganon.
I do want to ask one question though, because maybe this is me not remembering. I didn't think that the Trogs were related to the gnomes, aside from a fan theory. Right. I
I
thought that
don't.
I thought
Yeah.
that there was no actual confirmation that Trogs and gnomes were related. However, Trogs and dwarves were related.
Well, see, here's the weird thing. We do know. I mean, I do think that we think that trogs and dwarves are related, but we don't really actually know that either. There's never actually been anything showing, oh hey, here's an earthen or a dwarf, now they're turning into a trog. And we've seen trogs in the elemental planes. Like, it's only been like vaguely hinted that any of these things are actually related to trogs. The only people we know for sure are related to trogs are grummels,
Um.
because we know that
Yes.
the
And
grummels were turned in the
and
trogs were turned into grummels.
the things that live in High Mountain. Why can't I remember their name now?
The Drogbar?
Yeah, they're like Trog adjacent.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't think we have any actual we don't have anything of the Trogs turning into them or them evolving from Trogs or anything. It's just it's there's a lot of this stuff. I don't know. I I think we've just discovered something that would actually make a good
Yeah.
lore walker thing. Is like, what are Trogs?
Well, yeah, because I mean,
Like,
like, are they their own thing? Are because I remember some of the original artwork.
mhm.
Um, and I remember I want to say it was like BlizzCon 2008 or something like that. And then I remember and I know it's not canon now, but it can always become canon if they decide to make it so. The Manual of Monsters, which was the role playing game monster manual for uh, the actual like Warcraft RPG. Um, they had these as evolutions, like they were originally like this in between part between curse of flesh gone wrong. Like if you survived the curse of flesh, you became a dwarf. If you failed the curse of flesh, you became a trog. And I remember that being canon for a while because that's what they explicitly said, which is why you found them in dwarven areas. But then they started appearing other places where like they appeared in Deepholm, where they became stone trogs. Then they appeared under Olgrimmar. Why are they under Olgrimmar? Is there a Titan facility there? Is there something there that they that links them to them? Bran Bronzebeard in game has theorized that kobolds, and by extension snowballs, are actually an evolution of evolution of trogs. And this is from as early as I want to say it was the Warcraft magazine. I can't remember what volume it was, but there was a whole Titan Creations lineage chart, um, which was wild and is definitely not necessarily accurate anymore. But it was definitely the ravings of a Bronzebeard who was just discovering this stuff, and it covered everything from like the evolution of like the Faldorai, into the Highborn, into the Nagas and the various things, how the Dark Trolls and the Zandalari Trolls were related, Forest Trolls, Ice Trolls, all linking all of them together, all the different tribes of the Forest Trolls, how the Pandaren evolved, all that stuff. Like there were all these like maddening notes, which is I thought was always interesting. I'm going to take a random sidebar here. Uh, because I always liked this concept of Brand just keeps like a field journal that he just writes in all of his crazy thoughts as he
Yeah,
discovers
and
stuff.
if he speculates, it doesn't necessarily mean he has
Yeah,
any evidence for it. He just kind
correct.
of has an idea and writes it down. It's I think that's something I can believe of him pretty easily.
Yeah. But I always thought it was fascinating, and they could always go back to these things because again, they're not canon now, but they could be if they chose to
Yeah,
do
they
it.
could it could always introduce more evidence. I will point out too, while we're doing the Charlie Day, board of connections, it is pretty weird that
Oh,
both.
sorry, one last thing. I think it
Okay.
was Chronicles Volume One. I just remembered this. Um, did speculate that Earth and being afflicted by the curse of flesh was where Trogs came from. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
but I will point out to you that I can think of at least one Trog that we find on Mechagon,
Hmm.
King Gobamak, who has the ability to summon other Trogs to him, and thus there's even more Trogs, and that's in Mechagon. Meanwhile, over in Nomergon, lots of Trogs. Um, if Trogs aren't related to gnomes, then they seem to have some kind of problem with them. I don't know how else to put this. Like they just seem to really not like gnomes.
Hmm.
And I we know that unlike other evolved or curse of fleshed peoples, the mechanomes have somebody who can actually just turn them back. And if I honestly think if King Mechagon, if he'd actually found that guy, Overmaster Zod, I believe, if he'd found that guy, he wouldn't have had to do all of the weird experiments and stuff he was doing to try and turn everybody, you know, back into non-curse of flesh beings, because that guy could do it. He could, he actually did it to several gnomes.
Against their will, but he definitely did it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Against the world. I'm not saying he was a good person. I'm saying that he had that ability, and that's weird to me. That there's trogs everywhere. It almost feels like the fact that trogs could be then biosculpted by the Mogu into Grummels. And Grummels, I mean, if you told me that Grummels were a form of dwarf that lived, like, in different mountains, I would not necessarily disbelieve you. They kind of have a similar vibe, but they kind of also, they don't feel tremendously dissimilar to gnomes either. Like, you could imagine, like, dwarves, gnomes, Grummels fitting into the halfling position. I just, it's one of those things that I find myself musing about. To get around to it, though, I mean, ultimately, we don't have enough evidence for any of the stuff we're saying. Like, we've got, like, a mention in Chronicle, a couple mentions in quests from before. Original vanilla quests had some wild lore speculations in them.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole deal of the trolls calling Titans the travelers, and implying that trolls had been living on Azeroth way before anything Titanic ever showed up. Which might still be the case. I don't know. So yeah, it's pretty wild. There's
I was gonna say the other thing that we do, at least we do know about trogs in general too, and I'm not trying to make this all the trog show. And some of the things can be very simple too, right? Like we talk about, like Matt brought up their not, I don't want to say desire, but like their proximity to gnomes. We know that trogs are carnivores and potentially cannibals. They like meat. Gnomes tend to be a lot smaller than a trog. That could be just that they're hunting them as, a food source. A la, Fraggle Rock and the Doozers.
Certainly one possibility. Trogs are about, I'd say, almost twice as big, if not more.
Yeah, they're big. The trogs are bigger than a dwarf.
Yeah. Well, some of them. Some of the trogs I've seen are not bigger than dwarves, and some dwarves are really freaking big. Magni's huge.
Magni is huge.
Magni is freaking huge. Even when he's not. Now that he's not diamond, he's still freaking huge. That is a big dwarf, man.
There are, I mean, I don't want to, again, not to dwell too much on this, but there are a lot of stories that we could go into that I think would be really interesting. Like, we've never seen.
Imagine getting to see the Zandalari Empire start.
Yes. Getting the start of the Zandalari Empire, getting to see the original Troll Wars, getting to see the Stormwind riots, which we've never seen, which are a massive, pivotal part of the story and history of Azeroth and the Alliance, recent history, but like still very pivotal. Would spawn an entire resistance group and spawn an entire zone's worth of content, if not more, that has echoed for
all
ages.
The angst you could possibly imagine for 2 kings now. Yeah. And what's weird about that too is like Anduin doesn't ever really deal with it. Anduin has really never shown any particular interest in or desire to come to terms with the events of the Stormwind riots, which killed his mother and sent his father down a depressive spiral that basically lasted up until just before his own death.
I mean, to be fair to Anduin, I
just don't think Anduin knows how to deal with it.
I don't think he knows how to deal with it, and 2, he's been sort of going from crisis to crisis, like whether
his
it was
entire freaking life. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as a child,
he causes some of them.
He does. I didn't say what the cause of the crisis was, just that he happened to be involved in them. Some of them are world ending. Some of them see him being held captive in a torture scenario and then being ridden around by an ancient being as if it was a mech suit. Yeah, and then he's got to deal with the fallout depression from that and then everything else. He just now got back to, the mainland and just now got back to maybe dealing with some king stuff. So, maybe eventually he'll be able to deal with that, but not so much. But it would be interesting to see how that all shook out. We also,
If for no other reason that you get to actually see Tiff and Rin.
yes,
This
finally.
person has the one character who's never had any in-game appearances, and yet, pretty pivotal, married to one king, mother to the other. I really feel like we could stand to have seen more Tiff and Rin. Yeah, it's crazy to me that we haven't.
The other thing that we could see too are some of the survivor stories of the Scourge, which I think would be fascinating. I mean, not just Kalia. Kalia is probably the name that springs to mind the most. She describes what happened to her, but imagine being able to see that from her perspective. Living through the way she lived, having to hide, having to, look at the deceased bodies of your loved ones around you and try to figure out what you're doing next. Um, there's so many other survivor stories like that, or a story from the perspective of what it's like to be raised as a banshee or a dark ranger or something along those lines, because we've gotten little bits and pieces of it, but and we've talked about this forever, where it's like you get this thing where it's almost like amping up what you are, like what your rage is, what your aspect is that you have at that moment of death. So when you are alive, it's just pain and torture. But why? Why is it like that? What is it from their perspective? What are their final thoughts on the mortal? Why did they accept it? Right? Because in the case of the Dark Shore stuff, we learned that if you were playing Horde, unfortunately, you were rezzing people, and you were rezzing people as Dark Rangers or Banshees, essentially, with the help of the Valkyr. And if you got to a certain one and they rejected the offer, they rejected the offer. They weren't resurrected. There's a component of compliance in this that we didn't know until then. And I'd love to see, one, how that was figured out, and two, what that is like from the other side. What is that offer? What is that promise being made that we don't get to hear? Which I think is absolutely, potentially fascinating. And even if it's just a little thing where it charts everything that Sylvanas did as far as raising more allies and everything in there, getting more of that perspective would be interesting to me. I know not everybody, I know some people are still on the I'm tired of Sylvanas train, but I still think that the things surrounding her are fascinating. The choices that she made, the things that were being decided around her without her direct, intervention are also, to me at least, very interesting. Tons of options here. There's so many. I mean,
Here's one that I've wanted to see for a very long time: the actual genesis of the various Tauren and Tauren adjacent peoples from the Yongal on, and how it is expressed in their folk tales. Like there's that really messed up one about the shadow from the earth that went across the Shuhalo and drove them mad.
mm, mm-hmm.
That we don't have any idea what is this talking about? What is this? When did this happen? What is it describing? Um, and
And why did
I
they
in a
start
way,
fighting? Why did they start getting into war with the Centaur? What happened there?
yeah. Is that related to this whole thing? Like the
Mm-hmm.
centaur, also the origin of the centaur, we know it and we've seen enough of it that I'm not saying that we need to see it again. But at the same time, the idea that the centaur were born because Princess Theodrus, and you know, one of the sons of Cenarius started having children. It's like, how did they even meet? How did this relationship happen. It's like there's a ton of really just I'd really love to see like the fact that we have all these different Tauren people who I mean I love elves. Nobody doesn't love elves. Nobody doesn't love dwarves. Come on, they're fantasy classics for a reason. But we have seen a lot of them at this point. The elves just had like the whole Belemeth deal. Um, I'm not saying we have to never see elves again. I'm totally down for more elves in Midnight, but I would love if we got like some kind of all these different Tauren peoples having some kind of moot where they all get together. Maybe they don't accomplish anything. Maybe they just get together and are just really the Yongal are like incredibly hot tempered jerks. The Tonk are like, have you tried enslaving the spirits? The Shuhalo are like, no, we stop bringing that up. We're not going to do that. And the High Mountain are like, yeah, no, I'm also not down with this enslaving the spirits idea. But I will say, I don't mind punching them. The punching them part, I'm fine with. It's the fact where you go straight to enslaving them, that's crazy. That's going too far. Look, we'll go back to the Yongal for a second. Burn everything. Okay, those guys aren't going to help. But I would love to see it. I'd love to see more Tauren anything. Like I'd love
E-
to see us go back and actually see, like, were there like let's get to see those Tauren druids we've heard about from like the ancient times that knew Cenarius and knew his dad and had stories of his dad falling in love with the moon. And that's where Cenarius comes from. Malorn, they don't call him Malorn, obviously. Uh, what do they call him? Aparo?
I don't remember.
I think it might be Aparo. But at any rate, just there's a ton of stuff for everybody, really. Like we mentioned, dwarf trolls already. Stuff that we could see more of. Obviously, the Tauren. Joe already came up with really good stuff for the Forsaken. Uh, y- you know, Humans are gotten more than you'd expect, but like I've said before, there's a ton of holes in humanity stuff. We only recently found out about Lordain.
Mm-hmm.
Like the reason that Lordaeron is named Lordaeron is because of this guy Lordain, and we didn't know anything about him until fairly recently. Like he's very tied into the artifact weapons from Legion, but that's basically it. That was the first time he got mentioned. If it weren't the fact that he existed is the reason that the Tirisfal was called Tirisfal because Lordain and his guys were literally protecting the Tomb of Tyr. They were descended from the people who said, no, we're not leaving. We're not scattering the world. We're going to stay right here and we're going to guard Tyr's tomb because he was our friend. And I'd love to see Tyr fighting the Chithraxi.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to see the story of the Chithraxi coming after Tyr, how one of them got his bell rung and the other one fell down after the fight. And eventually later on, that dagger again shows up, the same one that we're dealing with right now, good old Xalatath, and woke him up, and caused the Akir Troll Wars, which the Akir Troll Wars that'd be a big thing to do. There's so many, but I mean, I feel like I'm leaving out tons of people that we could get some really cool lore walking stuff with.
Yeah,
Like
there's
the Draenei, like what's up with those guys? The Furbolg. Like, could we get some kind of consensus on what's going on with the Furbolg, please? Like, are they related to the Pandaren in any way? Like, who made the Pandaren? Like, were the Pandaren originally Furbolg that the Mogu messed around with?
I thought that was confirmed.
I don't. If I'd love to see it,
Yeah.
I just. And it would make sense for Lorewalker Cho to be interested in this. You know what I mean? Like, you'd think that he could at least be real curious about his own people. Enough to go look up their origins. So, yeah, I'd love a lot of that stuff.
The one thing that
I think you'd be right. Go
the
ahead.
one thing that I think might be topical coming up that I would love to maybe see is, with us going into a lot of the more Titan lore, seeing the initial war against the old gods and how that started with and beginning with the plucking of Yasharaj, the creation of the Well of Eternity. So like going with this first massive wound, showing how it was actually created, and how they devised like fixing it and what the reason was behind it. And we may get some of that because that may be
You see,
related. Go ahead.
I absolutely agree that that should be done. Uh, but I actually think that that should be the end of it. And first, we should get to actually see. We got this tiniest glimpse of this when we traveled back in time and saw the old gods fighting the elemental lords at the beginning of the creation of the Black Empire. I want to see what happens. First off, I want to see Odin get his face melted.
Well, yeah, for obvious reasons.
I want to see that a lot. I will sit here and root for Ragnaros all day. I will hold up a giant foam finger of Sulfuras, like it'll be the hammer, not a foam finger, but I'll hold that thing up and be like cheering, woo, melt his face some more. Because, I don't like Odin. Um, but just imagine getting to actually see the end of the war between the old gods and the elemental lords, where the elemental lords essentially get bound by some kind of powerful magic that binds people and makes them do things they don't want to do. I don't know how that could possibly, relate to other stuff we've been seeing recently. I'm looking like I can see you guys. Sorry, that's you can't see my face. But seriously though, I feel like the whole deal with warlock magic being from the Titans originally, and the idea of the warlock magic being able to bind and control demons, and the domination magic we've seen from the Shadowlands, and the fact that the actual elemental lords were bound and controlled by the quote unquote cipher of damnation. I feel like this stuff all comes together somehow. And it would be really good to start actually seeing pieces of it. The bit with Zalatath that we saw, that felt like the lore walking parts of that felt really important.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very important towards what we're going to see in Midnight, right? And the last of these three expansions is still, to my knowledge, called the Final Titan, right? Is it the Last Titan?
The Last Titan.
It's the Last Titan. I feel like we're on the cusp of getting to see the final, what the actual relationship between the old gods and the Void and the Titans really is. And I feel like the magic that can bind and control things is a huge part of it. I really feel like that's something that needs to get explored, and I feel like lore walking could absolutely do it. Plus, I mean, then there's stuff like you mentioned the Drogbar earlier. I'd like to know just like who are these guys? Are they Trogs? Like, could you show us that? I'd like to know more about the Drogbar. They were pretty cool. I mean, not necessarily nice people, but they don't have to be nice.
It's true, and I mean, and again, going back to the thing, I would love to see the Sundering of Azeroth, the actual like blowing up of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
continents, and what we've seen from Queen Ashara's point of view in the Warbringer, but what about the rest of the world? Right? Like, I just want to see like how everybody else like interpreted it and how everybody else, dealt with it, because that's one thing we haven't really seen. So, like, what is the I don't want to say creation myth, but what is the passed down story from that time? Because anybody who survived absolutely would have wrote about it or had an oral
Oh yeah,
tradition
yeah.
regarding it, right? So the
Well, it's like
fight.
I mean, yeah. I mean, like one of the things you pointed out a long time ago is that like some people just you know they had to bug out, and they would have lost a whole lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen that like tons and tons of elves got killed when Ashara failed to hold the wall of water back. That's just in one place. Like, what happened to all those Furbolg? What happened to the people living in places that are now currently underwater?
Yeah, because we know that
Um,
80% of the landmass broke apart, but that's 20% of the landmass that's just gone,
yeah,
and that's
and it was like
that's
huge chunks of connective land ripped apart.
yeah. And we talked about this. We've actually had articles on the website over the years, trying to piece Azeroth back together, and it doesn't fit. It doesn't work. And it wasn't until we got
The big
Chronicle
mapping
Volume
system,
One
yeah, Chronicle, yeah.
that we understood how incomplete it actually was. Like, you can put some of the land masses where approximately they are, but you're still left with like these huge chunks just missing. What was there? What was these remnants of the Black Empire? Were these settlements of living humanoids that had a culture that couldn't get out? It's a dark story, but it is a important piece of Azeroth's history that we know about but don't really know about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we know the broadest of strokes. We do not know, like for example, I mean, just looking at the map of ancient Kalimdor, because I'm doing that right now. Um, Looking at where Zulaman is considered to be on ancient Kalimdor, and it doesn't mean Zulaman actually existed as a city there at that time. I'm just saying that the point of where Zulaman currently is, extrapolated onto this map, it's fairly obvious that the distance between that and what is now the Zandalari
Hmm.
islands is enormous. There's so much land that just isn't there anymore,
Hmm.
or is underwater, or is like there's Suramar. Suramar is literally like there's the Well of Eternity, there's Suramar, then there's Zulaman all the way over there, huge distance. Probably it's just crazy to look at these and realize all this land is now basically water. Like there's just ocean everywhere here. Um, and it's just that even if your people survived it, they they'd have they'd have stories to tell about how they survived it.
Hmm.
And yeah, there's just so much of it that's just gone. I mean, and think about how widespread trolls ended up being. Like there's Zul'Farrak down, way down at the bottom of what is now modern Kalimdor. That's entirely across the ocean from Zul'Gurub, which is on the Eastern Kingdoms. Think about how far away these are from each other.
Hmm.
Like yeah, there's it's just so much distance and so much water between a lot of these places. Like the frost trolls, up in Northrend, um, Gundarak, you know, there's just tons of places that just separated by vast distances that at one time had the ability to travel, entirely by land. You could walk, although it would take a very long time. They're very far away from each other. But you could physically travel from Zulaman to Gundarak. They were that's why there are frost trolls in the Eastern Kingdoms, because they used to be able to just walk over there. And yeah, I mean, I'd love to get to see. Heck, I'd like to get to see Ashara's life. Like, was there a period of time where Ashara was cool? Because keep in mind that Ashara lived a very long time. Like, what was young Ashara like? Was she always a bit full of herself? Or did that happen because they just kept telling her how great she was over and over again? Kind of like, if you have an entourage of yes sayers, you're going to eventually turn into a bit of a butthead just because nobody's ever telling you, no, no, you shouldn't do that. Like when Ashara's like, I'm going to change the name of Valoon's holy city so it's named after me instead. And everyone was like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, is that how she got there? Yeah, there's just tons of these things, man. But yeah, you're totally right about the sundering.
Yeah, because I mean,
That, that,
think of everything it affects too, right? Like, I mean, we know that the path of Titans existed. We knew that that is something that tied the Titan facilities together. The Titan facilities themselves were tied together in a way that was functional beyond what we know today. Which, pre-sundering, we would have been able to see that information or maybe
yeah, and
speculate how
there's
they were connected. Go ahead.
no, and you're right. I mean, there's Titan facilities that today, like, we know the Well of Eternity had something built around it that fed the power back into Azeroth.
Mm-hmm.
And the only bits of it we have now are like parts of Suramar and parts of like the what do we call the Tomb of Sargeras, which was the Temple of Elune at one point. The Temple of Elune, we know it's got Titan facility stuff inside it. We've
Mm-hmm.
been in there, we've seen them. Like, what was it? It was obviously doing something with all that power, right?
It had to.
And it has places for all the Titan, the various objects that we use, the pillars of creation. Is that
Mm-hmm.
what they're called?
Yep.
Yeah. And the pillars of creation, there's places for them inside that temple. Why? What was Elune like? What was the point of them being in the Temple of Elune? What did they do? Why is it the Temple of Elune? Is it because it's related to the Well of Eternity? Like, there's the whole myth of Elune, spending the day in the well and then coming out at night. It's probably not true, but at the same time, maybe it is.
Well, especially
Because the well,
now that we've been underground and we've been seeing the vast array of crystals that exist that seem to have a purpose. Whether we Beladar is not the only one of its kind. We know that. Like, there's been tons of references, at least by others, of that there are other crystals like this, whether they are related to a loon or the Naru or literally any number of things. We don't know.
yeah, and for the fact that we've actually at least one myth ties Elune to the Naru
Yeah.
as part of the ordering of the universe.
Yeah, there's so much here, right? There's
We're at this point. The problem we have is the two of us are going to start spinning.
Well, I mean, to be fair, we have about 10 minutes left, so spinning is not necessarily the worst thing in the world. Um, but yeah, like we have an unprecedented opportunity with the way the game is currently to actually start exploring these in a way that is relevant to players. And that's one of the things that I think we've always wanted. Lore walking was something that I asked for dang near a decade ago at this point.
You campaigned for it.
I did.
You straight up were telling everyone that it's why are they not doing this?
Yeah, and then they did, and I'm very grateful for that fact. At least somebody listened. I think I know who, but thank you. Um, it's a vehicle that does something that we've talked about often on this podcast about other things. One of the things that makes games that have, a lot of story or a complicated story immersive is allowing you to experience that story firsthand, whether it's a flashback, whether it's moments that you get to just be an observer, whether it's something where you take on the persona of a key person inside of that storyline. These are all things that make it more immersive, and it makes the world matter more, because you can hear about these ancient warriors and civilizations and people that did XYZ, and that's fine, but seeing it firsthand is so much more different. Imagine going back to the War of the Sands and being a warrior, a night elf warrior on the walls there, fighting back the hordes of these eldritch horrors, these bugs that just do not have an end. The Silithid are not exactly warm and cuddly, and having to deal with the terror of that, having to deal with being so far from home, having to deal with being in a place that is almost anathema to life, because it really is. It's different to hear about it and hear about the struggles of people like Fandral Straghelm, or to see what happens when his son dies, to see what pressures have caused him to essentially crack. You
You know what
know,
you're making me think of?
what's that?
This is, before we had lore walkers, we did have
The Bronze
the
Dragon fight.
Caverns of
Yep,
Time. Yeah. And we had a raid,
we did.
the Mount Hyjal raid,
Yes, we did.
which replayed events from Warcraft 3.
Yeah.
It basically let you, as a player in WoW, who would, if you'd never played Warcraft 3 for some reason, you could still go into this raid and actually experience the whole build up to the end of that game. You could see it. You could fight actual monsters from those times, including the big bosses, and play a role in their defeat, right up to and including when Archimon blew himself up. You could be part of it. And that's something we could really be doing with this lore walking stuff. Like you could get like from having like you could start doing more and more like couple person groups, single person stuff. That's great. Do more of that as well. But you could also use it to actually start bringing raids out again. Like imagine you do want to do the sundering thing you were talking about. Imagine if there's like multiple almost lore walking experiences of the events that lead up to the sundering, and there's a raid at the end where you actually go in to keep Ashara busy long enough for Malfurion to blow up the world, essentially, to prevent Sargeras from coming through. And you get to see all that stuff. You get to see Brox go through the portal with the axe to fight Sargeras, knowing he's not coming back.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm gonna die. Please let me have my heroic death. All this stuff you could actually get to see, and not just read it, chronicle about it, or a book in the game, which is great. I love books in the game. I've never been against them, but you could let players see this stuff. I think it would be just awesome to do, and I think that I keep going back to the Sundering idea because my word, there's so much you could do. There's so many characters you could get to see and get to interact with. Imagine actually getting to interact with them.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing. Not just read about what they're doing, but you go and say, Ronan, maybe, I'm just saying in the future, you might, no, please don't tell me about the future. It's already bad enough. Like, oh, why do they always say that? I'm trying to warn you about your death, man. Like, there's just a ton of stuff you could just, oof. Imagine getting to be there and, your entire job is to keep Xavius like occupied until Malfurion can turn him into a tree. Like, you could get to fight that guy again. I'd love to stomp on this guy's face for a while.
Yeah. I think we sort of talked this one, I think, into the ground. Hopefully that it covers your topic. I know it's not necessarily a deep dive into the dwarves themselves, but
I think we both agree that would be great.
Yeah. And trust me, as somebody who plays a dwarf and has played a dwarf for many years, I want more. Give me more. But as Matt was saying,
no, I'm just saying it's one of those things where we could do an entire show just about the War of the Three Hammers, and probably we should.
Yeah, and I mean,
have we done it? Like we've kind of mentioned it, but I don't know if we've actually just done a deep dive on it.
We have actually. So way back when Anne was still here, we definitely did an episode that was the War of the Three Hammers. Now, that said, we could always revisit it with the updated information we know. Again, part of the interesting thing that we've had recently is added information that maybe makes sense but wasn't expected. Like a lot of the dwarven lore that got revealed tangentially because of the earthen stuff, learning about where some of the customs came from, some of the lore and the stories, like the whole Magni becoming a speaker for Azeroth and becoming made of diamond isn't unique. And we didn't know that until we were actually in the thick of the War Within opening chapters. And that was a piece of dwarf lore that had, like, we knew that there was a chamber below the royal chamber behind vaulted doors that I wound up in early vanilla going into GM prison a few times trying to get to.
My wife actually straight up got me in there.
Yeah, it was
She's
you could
crazy.
do it. You could do it with as a hunter. You were able to do a lot of weird, funny things with feign death back then.
Yeah, feign death or have your pet run up to the wall, then like see through its eyes and
hmm
then switch really fast.
hmm
Yeah, that's when she did.
Yeah, for those of you at
Can't ban
home,
her now, Blizz. It's too late.
yeah, I was gonna say in vanilla when you feign death, you had no hitbox for a couple
Yeah, you
seconds.
didn't exist.
So if you feigned death and disengaged, you went through solid objects. It was fun. I spent many a days on GM Island as a result of like exploring that area where I wasn't supposed to be, and it was always fascinating to me because like now we know that like that book of ancient magics, that large tome that Magni read from, started as probably something handed down from descendants of the Earthen, from
I mean,
those.
it was in Ulduar,
It was in Alduar,
and Ulduar was absolutely full of earthen at one point.
and
So yeah,
we know that the diamond warriors, the diamond folks were the ones that were made of that. I can't remember the name of them off the top of my head, but like they were always prophets. They were always, you know, incredibly important. They talked directly to Azeroth. Like this is a known quantity. Even the broken earthen knew this, which was absolutely fascinating because we didn't. We thought it was like a special accidental thing that happened. No, it turns out that's just what Azeroth does with her speakers or the people that are most important. It's just they become diamond. They become closer to their original roots, which apparently are all tied with the original Earthen to begin with, where they tend to be more constructs of, and again, we'll get into this, I'm sure, in The Last Titan. They're constructs of Azeroth more than anything else. They're closer to Azeroth than possibly any of the other, Titanforge races. She influenced them more than the others, possibly due to their proximity underground, possibly due to what their chosen task was. So much so that the Titan Watchers had to essentially break them, right? Or the Titans and the Titan Watchers had to cause them to be damaged. We didn't know any of that, but it all ties in with that a lot of the old like dwarf mythology, a lot of the old stories, like a lot of the stuff that Magni was talking about when we were helping him get prepared for the ceremony to talk to Azeroth. Like all this stuff started paying small dividends that I don't think anybody's really talked about. Uh, like those are little tiny pieces. Again, dwarf lore. There's so much we can go with. There's so many cool things. Like we haven't even gotten into like the fallen cities or anything like that because there's whole things there too. Um, yeah, it's wild, but we're gonna call it there. I think Blizzard Watch is made possible due to generous contributions at patreon.com/Blizzard Watch. Your continued support means that this podcast site and community is able to thrive and grow. Blizzard Watch supporters enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to the podcast, a better chance at having your question answered on our podcast of the queue, and an ad-free site experience. Again, if you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, be sure to send those in at podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. You can also hit us up on one of two Discord channels. We have the Q and Podcast question channel, which is open to everybody. Same rules apply. And if you are a Patreon subscriber, you can go ahead and hit us up on the Patreon Q and Podcast questions channel, where we tend to look there first as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. But with that, folks, we'll see you next week.